Good morning and welcome to Farm Factor. I'm your host, Jamie Bloom. On today's show, DuaneToews catches up with Glen Tonsor to talk about the current cattle market and what it might look like in the future. Next up, Greg Akagi brings us the Kansas soybean update. And then Kyle Bauer talks with Allen Featherstone at K-State about Kansas farm incomes. He shows a history of incomes and shows predictions of what future incomes look like. The Kansas Farm Bureau update is next, and to wrap up, it's Plain Talk with Kyle and Duane. It's all coming up on Farm Factor. Stay tuned.
Closed captioning brought to you by Ag Promo Source. Together we grow. Learn more at agpromosource.com. Watch Ag AM in Kansas online at agaminkansas.com.
Welcome to the Western Kansas Wildlife Travel Center, right here in my hometown of Oakley, Kansas. We're the front door of Western Kansas, located on three main highways, I-70, US 83, and US 40. And all those roads lead to history, beautiful scenery, and adventure, no matter which direction you go. We now have an IHOP. That brand that you've trusted up and down the road in all your travels is staffed with local folks, real people just like you and me, and we're waiting on you to join us. So for fun, adventure, fuel up, fuel your body, and let's have some fun.
Kim Mannering with Hardy Insurance. Today we will talk about umbrella coverage. Did you know that if your cattle get out, you could be held liable for that? Call me. Let's have a discussion. 316-945-6733.
This segment brought to you by Kansas Farm Bureau, the voice of agriculture. To join today or for more information, go to kfb.org or find us on Facebook and Twitter.
Welcome to Farm Factor. Up first today, DuaneToews talks to Glen Tonsor about the cattle and beef markets.
DuaneToews joining him once again here on Ag AM in Kansas, and an opportunity to catch up with Glen Tonsor from Kansas State University in the Ag Econ department. Glen, we think about the market for beef cattle from all segments of the cattle industry. Kind of at an interesting time right now, and fortunately we've been able to stay fairly current in terms of processing despite some things that we had happen this summer.
Very much so, and to kind of put a broad umbrella around my talk here today is I think we're done expanding the herd. I'm saying we're plateauing. There's not a real big incentive to shrink the herd nor expand it from here. We're projecting cattle prices for somebody that sells a calf here this fall, maybe $150, $155 for a 5.5 weight. That corresponds roughly with a break even. I mean, that implies, somebody that can run a cow for $880 to $900 cash cost. That is the number that corresponds with the break even. So we've set the stage to where I don't think we're going to expand the herd anymore. So that's the first part of this from a supply perspective. Keep going through the chain. We're sitting there at Stocker Field Day. I was talking about beefbasis.com is a resource I think our listeners will hear from in a different segment. You can project the margins for whether it's backgrounding or grazing systems and so forth. There's a lot of volatility in those projected margins right now, and part of that is because the CME feeder cattle futures market has moved a lot with some of those dynamics. Keep going. We get to the feed yard segment. There's a lot of red ink in the feedlot industry right now. Declining fed cattle prices, particularly relative to what we thought they were going to be a couple months ago, or certainly 6 months ago when cattle were placed on feed. So that's putting notable downward pressure on margins, and I'm projecting for the rest of 2019 that those negative margins will persist. There's a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. Look out to April and May of 2020 closeouts. So more cattle that we're thinking about placing now or in the next couple months looks to be break even. And I was trying to share some bullish points in my talk where I think I could tell the story to where fed cattle prices might rally beyond that, because there's some positive demand stories. There's a lot of good things on the domestic demand front as well as the foreign demand front. But we also have a lot of macroeconomic uncertainty. We have negative interest rates around the world. People that are watching the stock market see a lot of volatility. There's a lot of debate in the Federal Reserve. A lot of that stuff going on. And it's important to kind of connect the dots with that economic uncertainty and beef demand. Beef demand is most sensitive to good economic conditions. It's the most expensive protein. So when we have a recession, it tends to be beef demand that takes the biggest hit in the general meat protein space. So I was trying to share that and say, A, we need to recognize the importance of demand and its role it's had the last couple of years, but also be cognizant that at some point we're going to have an economic pullback, and that is bearish for cattle prices.
Talk just a little bit about meat alternative protein sources. A lot of concern, a lot of optimism. It kind of depends on which side of the game you're on.
Yeah, so the backdrop is there's lots of new products here and more in the pipeline coming. Some are plant-based, some are cell-based, and I use the term alternative proteins to kind of put a bow around it. And when I say that, I'm just referring to proteins that are quote-unquote new and don't originate from an animal. So traditional beef, traditional pork, those come from a live animal. That's quote-unquote traditional meat in some sense. These are alternative products. And yes, there's lots of questions and lots of consternation about their impact. There's a lot of unknowns about, what is going to be the future cost of offering them, exactly how price sensitive are consumers for them, and perhaps most importantly is which consumers are going to buy them, and are they ones that used to be traditional meat buyers that substitute out, or is it folks that weren't major traditional meat buyers? And at the extreme, to hold our listeners' hand, if it's vegan, vegetarians, and light meat consumers today that are the main consumers, then there's not much net substitution. If instead it's flexitarians that currently eat meat regularly but maybe not with every meal that substitute, then there's going to be a net substitution effect. So it's very important to monitor, and those are all the knowns I'm outlining. I also get questions about what this will do to trade. Most of these alternative products that are here today are positioned as substitutes for traditional ground beef, so hamburger patty substitutes and the like. And it's important to note that we traditionally import a lot of beef items for part of our ground beef production system. So one of the places we might see the first, let's call it market response, is altering our importing of beef as the meat protein quasi-ground beef space substitutes how we do that.
Our thanks to Glen Tonsor, Kansas State University Ag Econ Department, joining us on Ag AM in Kansas. Jamie, we'll send it back to you.
Thanks, Duane. Folks, come back after these messages for this week's Kansas Soybean Update.
Kansas Farm Bureau has served farm families and rural Kansas for more than 100 years, and we're pleased to offer new healthcare coverage choices for Kansans in 2020 through Kansas Farm Bureau health plans. No matter what stage of life you're in, we'll have options that fit your lifestyle. Plus, our network of providers is one of the largest available throughout the state of Kansas and beyond. For more information, including the different plans available, or to get a quote, visit kfbhealthplans.com.
About 6 jumps later, I was laying on the ground and thinking, boy, my shoulder sure hurt. I kept waiting, and it didn't get better and didn't get better. I'd heard about Kansas Regenerative Medicine Center on the radio. Got down there at 8 o'clock in the morning, and by 11:30, the procedure was all over, and it just kept getting better and better. And within 6 weeks, I was back digging post holes and doing the other hard work that I'd been doing before the accident. And I'm really pleased. It's really worked out well for me.
This segment brought to you by the Kansas Soybean Commission, the Soybean Checkoff, progress powered by Kansas farmers.
Welcome back to Farm Factor and the Kansas Soybean Update.
This is the Kansas Soybean Update. It's brought to you by the Kansas Soybean Commission. The Soybean Checkoff, progress powered by Kansas farmers. Rosalind Leake, Senior Director of Market Access with the U.S. Soybean Export Council, joins us. Rosalind, the U.S. and Japan recently signed the first step towards a bilateral agreement between the two countries. With Japan a top 10 export market for U.S. soybeans, that's great news for the U.S. soybean industry.
Anytime we have our government engaging in discussions with a trade partner about free trade or about trade issues, it's a win for the soybean industry. In this particular agreement, the U.S. soybean sector already had very good access to the Japanese market, so there were very few tariffs in which to deal with. There were some tariffs still in place on soybean oil, and so there is a reduction in those for the crude oil. The most important part of it is for the overall agricultural sector of the U.S. because our animal ag sector in particular has quite a lot to gain, particularly as Japan had gone forward with CPTPP as well as the EU agreement.
That's pretty big value for a value-added opportunity for the soybean industry because you're such partners with animal ag.
Certainly, when our animal ag sector thrives in the United States, we thrive as the soybean sector. So regardless of whether or not those soybeans are leaving our shore as whole beans, soybean meal, soybean oil, any other value-added product or animal products, it's good for our U.S. soybean farmers.
With the 63% market share making the U.S. the largest soybean supplier to Japan, do we continue to see Japan Japan's demand for soybeans grow?
Japan is what we would characterize as a mature market, so there's limited increase in consumption there. What we've seen over the past year is soybeans had a more favorable crush margin versus canola, and so we saw an increase in imports of soybeans. And certainly the U.S. was able to capture a larger share of that increased demand rather than other suppliers.
And how important is it for the U.S. to negotiate a successful trade agreement in the current trade environment that we're in?
Certainly in the current trade environment or in any environment, it is crucial for our sector to be engaged in those discussions, have free and open trade. These trade agreements, oftentimes they do deal with some tariff issues, but they also can get into many other issues, and there are chapters in there that talk about regulatory coherence and regulatory cooperation and all of those types of things. So anytime we are at the table negotiating with one of our trading partners, it's a good sign for the U.S. agricultural sector and for the U.S. soybean sector.
That is Rosalind Leak, Senior Director of Market Access with the U.S. Soybean Export Council. She joins us on the Kansas Soybean Update. It's brought to you by the Kansas Soybean Commission. The Soybean Checkoff, progress powered by Kansas farmers. Learn more at kansassoybeans.org. For Kansas Soybeans, I'm Greg Akagi.
Hope you enjoyed this week's Kansas Soybean Update. Coming up next, Kyle Bauer visits with Allen Featherstone from K-State about Kansas farm incomes now and in the future.
Sure Crop Fertilizers was started by my father, Don Sherman, and my mother, Shirley Sherman. Family business that started in the 80s. We predominantly focus on plant nutrients and what we can do to give growers better responses with the fertilizer dollars that they do, and what we can do to make those things work better for the grower. We're based out of Seneca, Kansas. We work with growers in their soil analysis to figure out what they need, and then we can put those in a blend that gives them the best results, and so that we can deliver that direct to their farm so that they have those nutrients where they need them, when they need them, and so that they can apply them in a manner that's very efficient to them and works well in their planting systems and what they're doing. Sure Crop Fertilizers has been around for a long time. We always say we're big enough to take care of everything you need, but we're small enough to do it quickly. You can get a hold of us at 1-800-635-4743. Our website is surecropfertilizers.com, and you can always email me at Corey@surecropfertilizers.com, and with any questions you have, we'll be glad to answer it and work with you.
This segment brought to you by Sure Crop, liquid crop nutrition delivered right to your farm.
We're back. Now Kyle is with Allen Featherstone from K-State discussing Kansas farm incomes now and in the future.
Hi, this is Kyle Bauer. I have the opportunity to visit with Allen Featherstone. He's the head of Ag Economics at Kansas State University. Allen, I heard you do a presentation talking about farm income across the state of Kansas. For the most part, it was skewed toward grain production, so we're going to focus on that. Tell us how the income for farmers on grain production over the last few years has gone.
Yeah, it's been kind of a roller coaster ride there. In 2014, income was about $140,000 per farm. Then it dropped precipitously to about $15,000. And then over that, the last 2-3 years through 2018, it increased about $100,000. Probably one of the big changes has been just the proportion of government payments. If you look at those numbers in 2018, roughly 40% of income was farm program payments.
And was part of that because of the tariffs at that point, or where did those payments come from?
Certainly, payments have been running about $20,000 to $25,000 due to PLC and the ARC programs. But in 2018, with the MFP programs, there was roughly $37,000 per farm from that income that drastically increased the government program payments to Kansas farmers.
And those figures you talk about are net farm income.
Right. In terms of the $100,000 would be net farm income, and the payments from the government certainly are just one-for-one dollars.
Well, and that is why it has such an impact on net farm income, because every dollar that comes from government payments goes pretty much exactly to net farm income.
No, that is correct. There's just not much expense associated with government program payments. And if you look at those as a share of income, that number has been about 50% on a number of farms.
Kansas is a big state geography-wise, and certainly the climate varies across the state. Does some of that variation come from weather differences, or how is that factored in?
Certainly there are weather differences, and if you look at the distribution, in 2018 there were still roughly 20% of Kansas farmers that ended up having a negative net farm income. Certainly some of that is from weather variability. Certainly others are from just cropping patterns in terms of as you move from east to west. There's been less ability to grow soybeans, and as you move west, that becomes less and less. And if you look at the MFP payments last year, they were very much tied to soybean production, and so there were big regional differences with regards to just what the income was from those government trade payments.
And how do we stack up for 2019? I realize that's a little bit tough, but can you get some indication how 19 will stack up?
In terms of if we look at 19 using the most recent USDA data, there's expectation that yields for corn, for wheat, were above the 2018 levels. Or 2018 levels. If you look at soybeans and sorghum, they're a little less than the 2018 levels. But when you look at the acreage, the prices, and that, the expectation is roughly we will see about 8% more gross farm income off those production. If you look at maybe 3-4% increase in expenses for variable costs, we're expected to see a little bit more from the market. And then if you look at the MFP program, that will likely be a little bit more generous than it was the last year. Some early estimates that we have in the department are that they could be on the order of $60,000 to $65,000 per farm. And so with that, we may see net farm income levels for the Kansas Farm Management Association, maybe around $125,000, $130,000.
Well, it's certainly reasons to be optimistic, even though there's much negative news that's out there. This is Kyle Bauer reporting with the head of the Ag Econ Department for Kansas State University, Allen Featherstone.
Thanks, Kyle. Come back after this break for this week's Kansas Farm Bureau update coming up next.
Kim Mannering with Hardy Insurance. Today we will talk about umbrella coverage. Did you know that if you're held liable in any type of accident, the judgment can claim your assets? Please give me a call so we can discuss. 316-945-6733.
Imagine turning soybean oil, used cooking oils, and waste animal fats into fuel so amazing it drives U.S. jobs and our economy forward. Learn more about biodiesel at americasadvancedbiofuel.com.
This segment brought to you by Kansas Farm Bureau, the voice of agriculture. To join today or for more information, go to kfb.org or find us on Facebook and Twitter.
Welcome back to Farm Factor and the Kansas Farm Bureau update.
I'm Crystal Carruthers. I am the Women's Chair for the 7th District. I started out on our Harper County Board, and then I got elected to state YFNR, and then through YFNR I was able to be on resolutions as the YFNR rep, and then after I was finished with that, it took me here to be nominated for the Women's Chair for our 7th District. I feel like you get to kind of show your strength and learn different parts of Farm Bureau and what it does for the everyday farmer. I mean, with YFNR, you're reaching just a different demographic and able to reach those starters and those ones that maybe they're trying to take over the farm or they just have different needs. And then you go to resolutions and you get to learn more about the grassroots almost part, where how those resolutions get started. And yeah, they're definitely grassroots because they come directly from our farmers and just work their way up, and then we vote on them at annual meeting. And then I'm just getting started at Women's Chair, so I'm still trying to figure out my role in that. Definitely education. I've been a teacher for 14 years and now I'm a principal, so that education is really important to me. I think everyone's just worried about healthcare. I mean, you see it in the news, you see it, you hear it at the coffee shops, and I think what Farm Bureau is trying to do right now and start this benefit is going to be amazing for all our members.
Stay with us. We'll be back after the break with Plain Talk.
What if sustainability were synonymous with U.S. soy? If energy efficiency, water quality, and soil health help define U.S. soy's value, that future is here, the time is now. To meet end-user demands, the Soybean Checkoff is committing to sustainability that's achievable, worthwhile, and enduring. A message from the Kansas Soybean Commission, the Soybean Checkoff, progress powered by Kansas farmers.
Hello, I'm Dr. Frank Lyons from Kansas Regenerative Medicine Center here in Manhattan, Kansas. Daryl was one of our patients that we did about 7 months ago.
I dug trees by hand for years and years and years. In the process, I wore out my rotator cuff. But when I learned about this process, I thought if there's a way to get rid of this pain, then I want to do it. So we did it and it worked. I'm not going to go out and take trees with a shovel anymore, but I can do the things that I want to do now.
Well, it's been very gratifying to help people with their painful joints and other entities, and it's been especially gratifying to be able to help people who I know and have worked with and known for many years.
This segment brought to you by Santa Fe Trail Meats in Overbrook. Let us help feed your family.
Welcome back. Now let's see what Kyle and Duane are up to today on Plain Talk.
Hi, this is Kyle Bauer with Plain Talk with the guy who always says, "What are you looking at? You're giving me the wonky eye."
What you got in your glass over there? I just noticed.
You know, that's the nice thing about drinking clear liquids.
Yeah.
Nobody knows for sure. Yeah, okay. The nice thing about being over 60 like I am.
You are.
Yes, yes. And soon you will be too. And you say this all the time. Not soon. You'll be lucky if you make it to 60.
I was going to say, somebody's being optimistic.
I learn something new every day, and the other 5 days I forget it. So I got plenty of room to learn new things.
Come back around.
Get it on on through.
Get on the second time. I think there was an old joke about meeting your wife again for the first time. It was an Alzheimer's joke.
Oh, that's not funny.
Well,
golly.
I mean, not. Yeah, no, Alzheimer's is not funny.
Yeah,
for anybody that's got a family member that's been afflicted by it. But
yeah,
early on there can be some funny moments if you allow yourself to have a humor.
Well, and that's what isn't that the old story about the old guys going to meeting every day? Tell the jokes every day. Every day they laugh at them because they hadn't heard them since the day before.
Never heard it before.
I'm closer to that than you'd think.
Your fact or fiction question of the day, Kyle Bauer. The population of New York City in 1776 was 25,000.
Okay, the year our country became a country. And by the way, New York City was our first capital. 25,000.
They moved it around for a while, did they
Went
not?
to Philadelphia once. I think it was in Philadelphia before going to Washington, D.C. I'm not sure why they moved it. Maybe I have those backwards. I think they're the same. 25,000. The country wasn't very big. 1776. I'll go with true.
That's what it says.
Wow.
That's not a very big town.
You know, I know now why we won the rebellion. Because Great Britain looked over there and it's like, really?
Well, I don't know that I want to fight over that.
They don't amount to anything. It's like, let them have their freedom. It's like they don't pay enough tax to even make any difference to. We're Great Britain. We got India and all those other places around the world.
Yeah.
Those people don't count for nothing.
But they're looking in hindsight now. Although,
actually, when they look in hindsight, they probably go, "Boy, we're glad we got rid of that when we did."
Don't have to deal with those people anymore.
Exactly. They're more trouble than they're worth.
Well, that could be the case.
Yeah. You've been there before, right?
I've been, yeah.
More trouble than you were.
My dad reminded me of that often when I was young.
Uh-huh.
On a weight basis, it was really bad.
Pound for pound.
Pound for pound. It was a lot of trouble. So, Well, you got
thought
any?
you already factor fiction me.
I did.
You
won. You win.
I win. And are we
See,
keeping score?
You're so dumbfounded when it happens.
I am. It's never happened before. I don't know how to act anymore after that. Let's talk Oktoberfest.
Yeah.
You know what? It's a big deal. I mean, for instance, Morganville, Kansas.
For whom?
For anybody who likes beer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
Count me in.
But here's the question. How many breweries are there in the United States?
In breweries in the United States?
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, now let's just break this down. There's 50 states. I'll give you that one. Okay,
yeah,
so
thanks.
now you can break it down.
50 states.
And then in Kansas, there's 686 towns, I think, in Kansas.
Yeah, I'd rather go with counties. There's
105
counties.
And you're thinking Kansas is kind of normal?
Most times we end up about in the middle, but I think there's more breweries on each coast because are they counting the micro breweries?
Well, I imagine, but they're not counting the guy who has one in his house.
No, but it's commercially selling product.
Total number of U.S. breweries. Well, you're counting them, aren't you?
12,500.
Well, you know what? You were closer than I was. 7,450. Now, that was counted day before yesterday, so we don't really know.
Could have been a new one.
Could be
lost
12,000 by now.
Yeah.
So it's like... That's
7,400.
A lot of people making beer out there to sell it.
There's a number of towns that I frequent that have more than one.
Well, and that's what you
But
really
there's a lot of towns that don't have any.
Well, so what's that work out with 7,450 divided by 50? That's about 125 per state.
Ish.
And we have 105 counties, and certainly Johnson County and Sedgwick County would have more than one.
Right.
But I bet there's counties out there that don't have any. Well, you did the math, and I think, again, I was flabbergasted at 7,450. You obviously were not.
Thanks for joining us. I'm your host, Jamie Bloom, and I hope you enjoyed today's show. See you next week on Farm Factor.
Closed captioning brought to you by Ag Promo Source. Together we grow. Learn more at agpromosource.com.